And who is the God who will deliver you from my hands? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If that is the case, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. Verse 18, but if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up. So Nebuchadnezzar has basically called out the Jews here, these three Jews, and he's kind of giving them a second chance here. He's like, okay, basically, I heard you're not worshiping this golden image when you hear the music, and he says to them again, if you'll do it, then good. But he says, if not, I'm going to throw you in the fiery furnace. And basically, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they're like, that's just too bad then, because we're not going to do it. They are faithful followers of God. And, they said, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But then in verse 18, it says, but if not. So what they're saying here, they're saying that God is able to deliver them, but if he chooses not to, then they're still good with it. They're ready to die in order to stay faithful to God. I mean, they're good with it. And so, that's a good lesson for us today that, no matter what trials and tribulations and struggles we face in today's society based off of, maybe some of the laws that our country makes, we've still got to serve God no matter what. One of the things that, it's been talked about several times over the last several years is the ideal, what if our government one day, and we kind of say what if, but a lot of people have the belief that it's not a matter of what if, it's a matter of just when. And we've talked about this over the years, what if or when our government decides to make certain laws that you can't say certain things from the pulpit anymore, or even right here teaching a class. It could very realistically happen where our government could step up and say, you cannot teach this doctrine anymore because it's hateful, or it's just not the way that we live in our society today. Because the ideal of our society today is that anything and everything goes, and that's just the way it is. That's it's been heading that way for several years, and it seems like the hill's getting steeper and steeper and just going faster and faster down it. Without getting too political or whatever, but if certain people are in power for a long enough time, it's going to be brought up. There's been people that's already brought it up. It's already been talked about by some politicians over the years. And so there are some out there, they want stuff like this. They want to limit what a preacher or a Bible class teacher can say. And so, the hope and prayer is that that'll never happen. We always hope and pray that, we can worship God the way the Bible teaches us, without fear of persecution. But the reality is, it could happen one day, and so will we be like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? And of course, Daniel, we're going to look at the story of Daniel, the exact same story in the lion's den. Will we always be strong like that? Will we raise our kids? Because our kids could definitely deal with some of this. If some of us, they're older, maybe we may not see some of this, but for our kids and our grandkids, we need to make sure that we're raising them in a way that they fully understand that it's God's way or no way. Doesn't matter what the government says or what your college professors tell you or high school teachers, because there's a lot of stuff out there that's in complete contrary to the Word of God. And so, like I said, for us, we've got to be strong in our faith, but we've got to raise our children and our grandchildren that way, so that they know later in life when they have to face issues like that they understand, it's not about what society says, it's not about what the government says, it's not about what college professors say, it's not about what anybody says except what God says, what His Word says. And it's very crystal clear, God is first in our life, and we've got to serve Him no matter what, even in the face of death. We refer to, after you become saved, we are to remain faithful unto death. And at Revelation 2:10, it says, "Be thou faithful unto death." Okay, and actually, if be faithful unto death is more, the way I understand it, it's more along the lines of be faithful in the face of death. Is kind of what that passage, I believe, is kind of a little more accurate translation. So, like I said, for Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, in the face of death, they would not turn their back on God. And we've got to be that same way. And we've got, like I said, we've got to teach our kids that, because, you know, we see how much our country has changed over the last several years. And like I said, sometimes it feels like that train's just going faster and faster downhill sometimes and picking up steam. And so who knows, it's hard to know exactly what our kids and our grandkids will have to face one day, you know, from, like I said, from forces outside of the church. So, then down in verse 24 of chapter 3, Josh was trying to get it back up, but I don't know if it's there or not. Verse 24 of chapter 3, "Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished." So this was after they had been thrown in the fiery furnace, and, oh, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself there. Verse 24, "So they would not worship the golden image." Verse 24, "Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, and he rose in haste and spoke, saying to the counselors, Did we not cast 3 men into the midst of the fire? They answered and said to the king, True, O king, so they have been thrown in the fire for their disobedience to King Nebuchadnezzar." Verse 25, "Look," he answered, "I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God." So we see here where they are thrown in the fire, and clearly God is going, just like they said, our God is able to deliver us, God is going to deliver them. So they are in the fire, and they are walking around. And this fire as well, you know, when they disobeyed King Nebuchadnezzar, when they would not worship, you know, it said he got very angry. He heated the fire 7 times hotter, it says, you know, because he was so angry with them. And the fire was so hot that when the people threw them in, some of them burned up because the fire was so hot, because he heated it that much more. And so here they are, they're walking around in the fire. You know, so that's an amazing thought to try and visualize, because we all understand what fire does. I mean, fire, it burns up things, you know. We had the burning bush earlier on in this class, and the idea of the burning bush literally not being consumed as it's on fire. And this fiery furnace, you know, there's no way to know just how hot it was, but we get the picture that, like I said, from the men who threw them in, some of them died because the fire was so hot. And yet, here they are walking around. Of course, you know, I asked how many was in there, and Sherry was right with 4. They saw 4 people in there. And obviously, you know, and it said there at the end of verse 25, the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Was this actually Jesus, y'all think? Of course, it says Son of God here. A son of the gods, yeah. You know, some other thoughts are, you know, possibly an angel as well. I did a little research on it, and when you get into doing research on particular verses or phrases or stuff, it seems like everything you research gives you a different answer. So, you know, it's one of the things that's kind of hard to know sometimes, you know, exactly what it is. And like you said, you got different versions that kind of word it differently and all. But go ahead.
Well, that phrase, a son of the gods, would seem to make more sense given who is speaking. What their perception of it is. Now, who it actually is, that's different. But
Yeah.
the speaker, they would have said, this a son of the God, seems more in line with their thought process, living in the pagan world that they.
Yeah, so the ESV, she said, a son of the gods, plural, right? And so, you know, obviously, idol worship, you know, they had many, many gods. And so, you know, that's her version there. What I've got right here is the New King James. I'm not sure what the King James says. Son of God, King James, which is same as the New King James. So Could have been Jesus.
But when it says,
Could have been an angel. Yeah.
when it says, when it says that the fourth form, the form of the fourth is like the Son of God. So it was like Jesus. So, I mean, I'd always heard, most people had always thought it was an angel.
Yeah.
But I don't, you know,
That's a popular thought.
you know,
Yeah.
but-
So,
But it was in the form of, it looked like Jesus.
yeah, it says, it was like the Son of God or like the Son of God's or,
The king wouldn't have known Jesus to say, that looks like Jesus. He would have just seemed like some spiritual being, I would think, that,
hmm
this is like,
yeah.
Yeah, he didn't say Jesus, he said the
Right.
Son of God, which we all know that was Jesus.
Yeah. So, but yeah, she brings up a good point. Like I said, it's, it's King Nebuchadnezzar.
That's the
Yeah, it's King
point of-
Nebuchadnezzar that's saying this statement.
It's not
Yeah.
until that point that he even accepts that your God is the Most High God. And
Yeah.
He doesn't say it's the only God.
Yeah.
He says it's the Most High God.
Yeah, because he does. Yeah, the very next verse in 26, then Nebuchadnezzar he starts to kind of have a change of heart, so to speak, as far as what he thinks about the Jews' God. We'll read there in verse 26. Verse 26. Then Nebuchadnezzar went near the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spoke, saying, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came from the midst of the fire, and the satraps, how you pronounce that, administrators, governors, and the king's counselors gathered together, and they saw these men on whose bodies the fire had no power. The hair on their head was not singed, nor were their garments affected, and the smell of fire was not on them. So, at verse 26, where he's starting to have a change of heart a little bit about how he's thinking about, I guess, gods in general, and maybe there is a high God, but he's still going to think of his other gods as well. But the description here about them, like not a hair was singed on them, their garments weren't affected at all, and there was no smell of fire. When something burns up, there's a distinct smell there that you can smell. And so there was no harm at all done to these men. Just a great thing. Verse 28. Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him. And they have frustrated the king's word and yielded their bodies, that they should not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree that any people, nation, or language which speaks anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made an ash heap, because there is no other God who can deliver like this. And then verse 30, then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. So he's given, I guess you could say he's given some due to God, but at the same time, he still believes in all the other gods as well, probably, because the way it's worded here, it says, nobody can say anything against their God, okay? And so, but at least, maybe it's kind of getting them to start thinking about the one true God. But anyway, this story there is a great story. And then anything else about that particular story? Yeah.
If you reference like Isaiah 43, it's talking about, it says, when you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you. For I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior. I thought it was the same in both cases.
Yeah.
So to me, that would be nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So, very well could be. Yeah.
Jerome, one of the things that's
Yeah.
always stood out to me about this story, and I don't have my Bible in front of me, I don't know the verse, but
Are you busy with something else there? I mean, what?
a little bit,
Just go.
it drew on me. statement that they make, like right before they go in the furnace, has always been very humbling, where they basically say like, okay, we're going to go in this furnace because we're not going to bow down. Now,
Right.
God may save us, and if he does, you'll know. But if he doesn't, you need to know we didn't stop serving God.
Right.
And so it's like their faith wasn't dependent on God physically saving them.
Yeah.
They were like, either way it turns out, like we're going to serve God, doesn't matter.
Exactly.
And that's always, it's neat looking at it 2020, hindsight being 2020. I look back and I'm like, oh, God saved me. Yeah, I'd jump in the furnace too.
Yeah.
But they were ready to die in that furnace.
Yes.
And I don't know, that's always just really humbled me.
Yeah.
To think about them being willing to make that statement.
Yeah. Yeah. And along those same lines, I think of Acts 5:29 says we ought to obey God rather than man. Here's a perfect example of man. Man is telling God's people, hey, worship this golden image, or I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna throw you in the furnace. But they didn't heed to his warnings or anything. They didn't worship the golden image. They, so to speak, stuck to their guns. They were not going to turn their back on God at all. And that's something that we've got to always make sure that we stand firm on the truth and never turn our backs on God, no matter what situation we find ourselves in this world. Because, like I said, there's times that we don't know what the future holds, but certainly there could be some challenging times. From our government, our elected officials. It's going to be interesting to see how things play out in the future. And like I said, especially for our children, because they've got so much longer to live than us. And so we got to make sure they understand that it's God's way, and that's it. The Bible does talk about we are to obey our local officials and all that. We are to obey the laws of the land. Romans 13, I think, says that. Is that right? I believe, yeah. And I think there's another passage, maybe in one of the Corinthians. But anyway, we are to obey the laws of the land so long as they don't go against the laws of God and His Word. And so that's something that, the laws of the land, they're changing. And they're changing in a way that is completely contrary to the Word of God. And so we got to make sure that, like I said, we're grounded and we're firm on what the truth is, and we're not going to turn our backs on the truth. We're not going to turn our backs on God, and we got to make sure that the next generation, our kids, that they know that as well. That the importance of staying faithful, no matter what. You had something else?
Yeah, and another thing, what you're saying is bringing back up to mind, like, in the book of Daniel, one of the things God tells the people is like, hey guys, y'all are going to be here for a while. They had a significant amount of time before they would be released from captivity. And
Yes.
Daniel received the prophecy knowing that was going to happen.
Yes.
And I've always really been encouraged that, they were living in the midst of this heathen nation. They were trying to get them to turn away from God. But Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego all were able to, first of all, God didn't tell them to run away from the city. God expected His people to live amongst that sin and to establish their homes and to shine as beacons to the sin around them. But also, those men and a host of other Jews were able to insert themselves into this nation and curate a significant influence.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I've always thought there's no possible way that for Christians to really have a huge influence in a sinful world, but Daniel and them is a spit in the face of that. They were in the midst of sinful people, and that's obvious just from this story.
Yeah.
But they dug in and they held their influence and their faith.
In the face of death.
Yeah, I think you can do both of those. You can
Yeah.
hold influence in a community and you can hold your faith and not compromise yourself. You don't have to compromise yourself to make a difference or an influence in the world. And
Yeah.
I think they're huge examples of that. And God didn't just take them out. They had to live amongst that. I see a lot of parallels to us today.
Yeah.
We're not gonna
And the
get out
thing,
of the
and the
sinful
thing for us today, we don't face that kind of persecution. So it's easier for us to be that shining light, to those around us. Because like I said, like I said, I talked about how in the future our government may make some changes to where, you may be threatened with going to jail if you preach a certain doctrine. We'll see how all that plays out in the future. But, for right now, there is no threat of us being thrown in the lion's den or in the fiery furnace or being thrown in prison for preaching or teaching any certain thing. So we don't have nowhere near as much persecutions per se as what, like I said, the Jews here in this particular story as they were captives of the Babylonians, and of course the apostles as well. When we get to the miracles there in the New Testament, the same for them. They faced death, for preaching Jesus. And so, like I said, we don't face that kind of persecution. I mean, we have persecution, but nothing like they did. You had something else? Yeah.
But if we did face that kind of persecution, hopefully we would shine brighter, because I think we're dimmed living in this country because we're spoiled. We've got lazy, complacent. Because it's in situations like that, or currently in third world countries where Christianity is most persecuted, where people seem to fight the hardest to spread it. But we're complacent because we say, well, we've got freedom of religion, we've got freedom of speech, we can teach all the time. So we don't, because we can always do it, so we don't. And in situations like Daniel and the apostles, when it was really put to them, that's when they tried the hardest, and when the contrast was the starkest.
Yeah.
Right now, we just sort of blend into everybody else.
Yeah,
We're all kind
we got it
of
easy.
mediocre kind of Christians, and I mean that as a country.
Yeah.
And so we all sort of blend in, but, when it's a stark contrast, people start to want to know more. Why is that different? Why are they different?
Yeah. Yeah. Any other comments?
We've seen a little bit of the persecution out here in Georgia. Woodstock Church faced a very similar
Yeah.
situation.
Yes.
Standing up, what the Bible said.
Yeah.
And we're taking to court. And if I remember correctly, one of the elders lost his job.
One of them did, from my understanding, yes. And so, like I said, that's awful to think about. But yeah, because the company, I don't know all the details, but obviously the company he worked for, I guess I'm just kind of speculating. I guess they felt like he was wrong and they didn't want an employee. I guess like that is, I guess, basically what it boils down to. And so, yeah, and I, certainly, we've prayed for the Woodstock congregation. They've kind of, so to speak, I guess, weathered that storm. I understand. I think things are calmer now as far as all that goes. But, some damage was done. Like I said, an elder lost a job. I mean, a job is important in this world. You got to have a job. And so one of them lost his job. And
But if you look at that, the way the world looks at everything today, if you say something, a racist comment, somebody, well, they can sue and carry on over it, but if you're trying to do God's word, you don't see a bunch of people lined up saying, you can't fire this man, he did what he felt right.
yeah,
They do, but it just doesn't work in the same direction for
Yeah.
the church as it does for the work.
One of the other things that I found on the forward, and this is just a scenario, but it said that the word for in Hebrew is dalet or something, D-A-L-E-T, which means door. And Jesus is our door. Jesus was their door.
Yeah.
And it went on to say that Jesus was with them during their trial, and he brought them through. And he's with us today, and he'll bring us through our trials.
and you talk about a door, where's that passage about? Something about Jesus, the door. In the New Testament, there's something about Jesus being the door. I'll have to look it up. If one of y'all find it, y'all mention it Sunday. But yeah, all right, that's a good point. I like that about what the number 4 represents. Like I said, like a door. So yeah. All right, thank y'all for y'all's comments, and see y'all Sunday. John 10:19, Jesus says, I am the door.
Sarah found it.
Thank you.